hit exactly where we know. We know Passion Puddle, we know its significance, and every day it counts. And with this, I get to introduce one of our professors. He's an associate teaching professor in human ecology. Many people have seen him outside of his classroom with his bike. As some of us would say, arguably the most bearded faculty member, as well as probably one of the most beloved in the Cook campus. I would like to introduce to you guys Dr. George Clark.
Thank you. I think I'll end now. For the benefit of those who've had me in class, good afternoon. How you doing? For the rest of you, welcome. As this is my last public lecture, when I was asked to do this and agreed to do it, I said, do you want me to do the 55-minute version or the 80-minute version? Because I'm used to talking in 55 and 80-minute chunks. And the response was 10 minutes. So I'm hoping I'll be close to that. For the record, I also want to say there's no truth to the rumor I knew Colonel Henry. There's no truth to the rumor I was friends with George H. Cook. Occasionally I've had students call me George H. Cook. And there's also no truth that I was born in a log cabin at the display gardens. In recent years, some students have started referring to me as a wise old man. They got two of those words right. I am old, I am a man, I don't claim to be wise. Sometimes I've heard other adjectives in there too. We won't go into that. In recent years also, students have frequently commented on my courses teaching what they have called life lessons. And at first I didn't quite appreciate that, but I eventually came to appreciate it. At the time I simply thought during the course of my lectures, sometimes I told stories, and they were often based on my own experience and what I learned from that, and I wanted to share them. I didn't think of them as life lessons, but the term became so common that eventually I came to see that that was sort of appropriate. Part of the reason I think it's appropriate is that your generation in many ways has a lot more materially and a lot more in the way of opportunities, and that is as I think it should be. That's what we should want for every succeeding generation. When I talk to people from outside the university, I often hear, those kids today, they're no damn good, are they? And I say, no, that's not true. They're lazy, aren't they? No, that's not true either. There are a lot of misconceptions about that. And the fact of the matter is, you do have more materially. When I started college, people moving into the dorms had a radio. If they were big time, they had a TV. Wow. And a record player. So you guys certainly have a lot more than that, and that's good. But at the same time, you have also been thrust into a world that is changing at an ever-accelerating pace. And as that has happened on the downside of things, in many ways I think your generation does not have the sort of anchors that my generation took for granted. And by that I mean institutions and people that were part of most of our lives that we could take for granted, people we could go to whom we trusted. Institutions that seem to be looking out for us. And in that sense, I don't think you have that, as much of that as we did. And this is precisely the point in time where I think young people need that the most. So I came to accept the idea of life lessons, and also because my view of education has always been much wider and deeper than simply standing up in a classroom and spouting facts. That's part of it, but that's only a small part of it, I think. So I did come to appreciate the term life lessons, and I wanted to use that as sort of a hook to organize them. And for the first time, I actually sat down and thought about what are the key things that I think I've learned in my 70 years on the planet. So I will share them with you. and if you like them, you can take them with you. First is, honesty is the best policy, not just with other people, but especially with yourself. It's very difficult to do that. It was only a few years ago I came to accept the fact that I'm never going to be in the National Basketball Association. But ultimately, each of us has to live with ourselves, so it behooves us to be honest with ourselves. Following up on Dean Storch's comment, in its heyday, the IBM Corporation's motto that it used in its advertising was simply the word think. And I don't think it's coincidental that IBM lost a lot of its status as that word became de-emphasized in their advertising and apparently as part of their corporate mindset, unfortunately. Whether you're ending your formal education here or at some point in the future, you should continue learning. You should set aside time to actually think away from distractions. If you don't do that, if you don't continue to learn, then we have failed you, and I hope that's not the case. If that's the case, then you will be an educated person only in the most superficial sense of having credentials. And that to me is not really an educated person. An important form of learning is to learn from your mistakes. We are all human, we all make them. The important thing is that we learn from them so that we're not making a second mistake by not learning from them. Equally important is not to beat yourself up over the mistakes you make. All of us make them. We all make them throughout our lives in various ways. Hopefully we do learn from them. But the fact of the matter is we can't go back and change what we've done in most cases. We can only move forward from where we are at the moment, and that's the best we can do. So if we learn from our mistakes, we can move forward in a better direction and in a more positive way, and that's really the important thing, I think. As I have often told students who are worried about they bomb a course or something like that, or they have to change majors and they're here a little longer, the important thing is where you end up, not how you get there in the long run. I didn't set out to have this career. I am blessed for the fact that I ended up here, and that's really what's important to me. I could have done it a lot more efficiently, but I didn't. That's okay. It's okay, because it made me appreciate where I ended up that much more. In the land of the blind, the one-eyed is king. This is a fancy way of saying something many of you have heard from me, and that is knowledge is power. I believe that to be true. Be wary of people who want to control information and knowledge. It's not likely they have your or our best interests at heart. Their motives should be questioned, particularly in this era when we have quote-unquote alternative facts, truthiness, and a denigration of science and knowledge in our culture. It's important that you keep a cool head and, as Dean Storch said, question things. The only certainty is uncertainty. It's very uncomfortable, but it's real. Well, the fact of the matter is, all the major decisions we make in life are leaps of faith, whether it's choosing a career, choosing a partner, choosing whether or not to have children. We never know how it's going to turn out. There are no guarantees, although we don't like to acknowledge that fact. There's the old saying that I think is actually more broadly true. When the student is ready, the teacher will appear. I think more broadly that's true in life in terms of being open to possibilities, and I encourage you to be open to possibilities in the future. If we don't make those leaps of faith, we're going to lead very dull and boring and contained lives, and not very interesting ones and not very fulfilling ones. So we all have to make those leaps of faith. Do the best you can, and that's all you can ask of yourself. Don't let the turkeys get you down. I think of this in conjunction with the "Are You Screw?" Unbeknownst to you, on Degree Navigator, only visible to university administrators is the "Are You Screw?" core requirement. If you have not been "Are You Screwed?" I'm sad to say you won't be getting your diploma. It's actually good practice for the so-called real world. I've always said Rutgers is very much the real world. But the fact is, throughout life, you have to deal with fun groups like insurance companies, the Internal Revenue Service, Division of Motor Vehicles, and other delightful bureaucracies. We prepare you for that here. And we don't even charge you for it. At least not yet. Practice random acts of kindness and senseless beauty. When you have an opportunity to do something small for somebody that will make them a little happier, make their life a little easier, do it. It will do something for them, and we never know how we affect others for sure. I've learned that by having conversations with former students over the years, and they mentioned something I said in one class on one occasion that I don't even remember saying, and that's what, of all the things I said, that's what stuck with them. So I've always tried to be very careful about what I've said, for that reason alone. But sometimes you make someone's day at a moment when it's particularly crucial. So in the last few years, I've always opened class with "Good afternoon, how you doing?" And the reason, I always did the "good afternoon" thing, but I did the "how you doing" thing sporadically. I added it because one of my students wrote as a comment that he was going through a tough period, and when I said that in class, he knew I wasn't specifically addressing him. But it made him feel better. It made him feel like somebody cared. It's such a small thing. So I made it a point to say it every class after that. It's an example of changing somebody's life in a significant way by doing something very trivial, very small. And it'll make you feel better too. The real currency of life, I've found, is not money. We all need some. But the fact of the matter is, studies repeatedly show that happiness does not increase with income after a certain point. And I've seen a couple of different numbers ranging from 70,000 to 100,000 a year. After that, people don't get any happier. The real currency of life is time. You should appreciate the people who have given of their time to you. Little League coaches, friends, other scout leaders, other people who have given their time for your benefit. That's really giving you something of value, more than money. And I think it's important to acknowledge that. Keep the distinction between what you want and what you need in mind, because they're two very different things. Our society goes to great lengths to convince us that about things that we should want and therefore we need. The fact of the matter is, we don't need most of those things. And half the time we don't even want them. But through the miracle of advertising and peer pressure and other mechanisms, we sometimes become convinced we need things that we really don't. Find and savor the small joys of life. Graduation is certainly a memorable event in people's lives. It's a milestone, it's important. But the fact of the matter is, most of our days are ordinary. Look for things that give you pleasure that happen every day. Take a few moments and savor something unexpected, or savor something you have all the time, like a cup of coffee in the morning, a hot shower on a cold day, hearing a small child laugh, seeing an unexpectedly beautiful sunset. These are things that make the times in between those milestones something more than filler, and they are. And remember, we are all works in progress. Those of you who've had me in class have heard me say that. I am a work in progress, as are you. I'm just further along, at least in time anyway. On these occasions, speakers often charge graduates with doing great things, usually meant in the sense of becoming rich and famous, conquering the world, and solving all the world's problems. I am not going to charge you to do that. I am going to charge you to do good and to do well. To do good for others, to do something constructive about the environment or some other of the many problems we have to work on in our society. And by doing good, you'll be doing well. You'll be doing good for yourself, good for those you love, and good for the rest of us. If you do that, you'll have a successful future. In some ways, I feel like a member of the class of 19, especially in the sense that I too am about to find out for the first time, is there life after Rutgers? I expect there is. Thank you.